want to talk about something today that I think is probably the single most important mindset shift that every parent that of this current generation, people who were raised in the 80s and 90s, have to go through if they are going to become effective parents who raise resilient kids, resilient not only as children, but throughout their life. That is how important I think this is. In fact, I started a membership a couple of months ago. In that membership, one of the first things that was available to anyone who signed up as a founding member was a complete course, just included in the membership. And I think that this is so important that the very first lesson in the very first module in that course is called No Bad Feelings. This is the starting place because this is the single most pervasive and one of the most harmful myths that all of us were indoctrinated into as children who were raised, again, as millennials in the 80s and 90s. All of us were taught, or most of us, I shouldn't say all because that's generalizing, and I should say the vast, vast majority of us were taught that we should categorize or to categorize intentionally or subconsciously our feelings into good feelings, things like happiness and joy and gratitude and excitement, and bad feelings, things like frustration and envy and jealousy, and I think probably more than any of the other ones, anger, even sadness. So we have these two competing things in our head. We have our good feelings that we're trying to feel, and we have our bad feelings that we are taught. Those are not things that you want to feel. Those are not data points that you want to consider. And what this does ultimately is sets us up to be profoundly confused adults who are not good at working through our challenging or even uncomfortable feelings. We are only people who know how to feel the good parts of life. And it actually suppresses not only the bad feelings, but also the good feelings. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I just want to start by saying how do we get to this point? How do we get to the point where so many of us were raised within this paradigm where there's good feelings and bad feelings, even though we now know through psychology and modern brain development that thinking that some feelings are bad and should not be felt is really, really harmful to our psychology. So how do we get to this point? Well, I think it comes from the traditional parenting mindset, starting with a baseline expectation of obedience and compliance from kids. I don't know about you, but for sure, most people that I talk to, most of the parents that I work with who are from my own generation, who were raised, again, from about 1980 to the mid 90s, these parents, by and large, were taught, disciplined in such a way that assumed that the highest good for them was going to be total and complete unquestioning obedience to their parents. And even if they were taught to think critically, which kind of seems to fly in the face of this, there was still an expectation of ultimate compliance to their authority figure. Now, we could get into all the sociological and religious factors that lead to that conclusion, but I think it's fair to just say that was the baseline starting point. And so whenever children who don't, remember, have a fully developed brain until they're in their mid-20s that's able to effectively regulate their emotions, either good or what we, historically have considered bad emotions. That kids, when they feel things that are uncomfortable, things that often cause them to go into a tantrum or a meltdown or other, words for dysregulation that causes them to be disobedient or disrespectful, that any of those feelings that cause that type of behavior, it's easier to have those children just not feel those feelings than to effectively walk them through those feelings. But ultimately, we've known actually since all of us were kids that this is not the way to do it. In fact, I think the greatest parenting influencer of all time, Fred Rogers, said it best when he said, "I want to teach children that all feelings are mentionable and therefore manageable. Anything that is unmentionable is not manageable." And so this is really the paradigm that we're approaching it from. We were raised in such a way that would kind of guarantee our compliance because if we ever felt something that would push us into dysregulation, whether that's frustration or anger or sadness, things that made us not fun to be around as little humans, that we were told, hey, look, that's not a good feeling. Don't feel that way. We don't want you to be going through these feelings. And we internalize that. We internalize that not only from the explicit things that our parents said, like, oh man, that's a rough feeling. I don't like feeling, that's really pretty empathetic. I'm probably giving our parents a little bit too much credit, but not only, through explicit things that they said, like, oh, that's, you're angry. That's not good. Don't be angry. Right? I can see that you're frustrated. Don't be frustrated. But also through the implicit things that they did. When we were expressing an uncomfortable feeling and that was coming out in perhaps inappropriate ways, our parents turning away from us, our parents telling us that they were disappointed in us, other ways of shame, which we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now here on the channel. So as we're understanding, how we were indoctrinated into this, so that we can understand that we're going to move through this, we have to begin with the baseline assumption that most of us are coming at this from something that's been internalized in us for so long, since we were little kids. The result of that, the fruit of that tree that was fostered and nurtured by our parents' explicit and implicit actions, is that many of us were taught to suppress and repress any feeling that was not inherently labeled or considered by our primary bounce board, aka our parents, to be good feelings. I remember when I was a kid feeling envious of another kid on the block. He got a new toy. It wasn't a toy, it was a go-kart. It was actually pretty dangerous, but it was the 90s and we just let kids get into go-karts that went 40 miles an hour and they flew up and down the alley, cars pulling out in front of us and stuff. And I was maybe 7 years old, and the kid 2 doors down, his dad worked on cars. And so he built him this really high powered go-kart. And I asked my parents if I could have one. I was very envious of this go-kart that he had. And instead of saying it is hard to see people with things that you don't have, and this feeling that you're having, this is envy, and this is just a data point. My parents were just they just shut me down. They're like, don't feel jealous. That's not a good thing to feel towards someone else. Don't be envious. Don't want for things, And some of that was built into my religious framework that I was coming from. But a lot of that was just coming from, modern parenting in the 90s. That was what you told kids when they were jealous or envious of their friends' toys, just don't be don't feel that way. And I remember holding that with me and saying you know what, this is something that I'm not supposed to feel. And this is something that I'm not supposed to express. Well, throughout my life, I've actually had to slowly, carefully pick apart any feeling of envy that I've had for anything else, because now, when I feel envious of something, I try and tear it down. I try and attack it because I know that feeling of envy is not good and I shouldn't feel that. And so I try and find a way to not feel envious of that person. I get very defensive when somebody has a bigger, a better car or something like that. It's really stupid stuff that I don't really care about. But anytime I feel envious, I want to target that the person who's seemingly triggering that envy in me, because I don't want to feel it. And here's, I think, where this really comes to a head for our kids. If we do this, if we perpetuate the thing that was done to us and we continue this belief for our kids that some feelings are good and some feelings are bad, that some feelings are meant to be felt and some feelings are meant to be suppressed, then ultimately what happens is that they grow into adults who are not willing to feel the full range of human emotions that are present in every human being's life. But ultimately, that never works out for us, right? I just want to say that. It never works out for us. I've never known a person who could suppress their feelings so effectively that they never ever came out. And this is what I want to offer you today. If you take nothing away from this video, I want you to take away this. If you are unwilling to work through your feelings, whether with your children or as an adult, then your feelings are going to willingly work through you. If you are unwilling to work through your anger, if you keep pressing it down and bottling it up, your anger eventually will come to a point. You will come to a breaking point where you can no longer suppress that emotion, and that anger will come out and it will work through you. And it will cause you to do things that you don't want to do. It will cause you to react in really inappropriate ways and uncomfortable ways. I like to say that it's kind of like, a pressurized canister. If you pressurize something and you keep pressurizing it and you never release any of that pressure, it does explode. And when it explodes, I don't know if you knew this, but even like an air compressor that you have in your house. I used to work in construction. And when you have an air compressor, that's one of the most dangerous tools on a job site, because when it's at 100 PSI, if somebody, drops something on that, or something falls down on that and explodes, it goes off like a bomb, right? This is the same with humans. This is the same thing with our emotions. If we believe that certain emotions are bad, we necessarily are not going to be able to process those things effectively, because anytime, if you're going to work through an emotion, you have to be willing to feel it. So instead of just telling our kids that their emotions are bad, instead of telling ourselves that some of our emotions are bad, what our real job as a parent is to work through our emotions with our kids, to work through, I should say, their emotions with them in safe and effective ways, to have better ways to work through their emotions rather than just pressing them down. Is this going to be harder than simply gaslighting your kid into believing that some of their emotions are bad and should be suppressed? Yeah, it is. It is a harder road. It's a harder journey. The difference is when you effectively cause your child or convince your child that they should suppress their feelings at 25 years old, or usually a lot earlier than that, those feelings come out in inappropriate ways. And then I would argue that you haven't done your job as a parent. You haven't taught your child to live in a world where they can feel the full range of things and work through them effectively. If instead you teach your child to process through their emotions, it's going to be much more difficult. It's going to cost you much more time and headache and challenges. And that's why I have these videos, is to teach us how to do that effectively. But if we don't start from the paradigm shift or mindset shift of wanting to do that, we're going to give up, because it's way harder to do this than the alternative, which is just to allow them, or not allow them, but to force them to not feel their feelings. So what are the 3 things that you can do if you are willing to adopt this mindset of no bad feelings? What are the 3 things that you can do to effectively help your kids to experience the world profoundly differently than you likely experienced it? What are the 3 actionable steps? Number 1, if we want to have our kids do anything in life, we have to be willing to model it. If the first step always begins with the parent doing their own work and deconstructing their own beliefs about their own feelings. I understand it's really, really desirable for most parents to not do their own work, to just move to, how can I parent more effectively? How can I raise my kid to not be have the same problems and struggles that I had? But I just want to say this. If you are unwilling to feel the full range of human emotions, your kid is going to be able to pick up on that no matter what you say. And we're going to talk about language here in a moment, but no matter what you say, no matter what else you do to try and tell them that they're allowed to feel all of their feelings, if you're not willing to feel all of your feelings in healthy and effective ways and apologize when those feelings come out and leak out in ways that maybe, because you're new to this whole allowing yourself to feel things, are harmful to others, if you're unwilling to do that, if you're unwilling to, and this is a word I use a lot, model that for your kids, they will always internalize that some feelings are bad and some feelings are good. This is why these myths are able to be perpetuated even if parents aren't explicit in things that they say. Because well over 80%, according to research, of our communication with anyone, but I would argue especially children, is nonverbal communication. What your kids see you doing as it relates to your expression of feelings and emotions is going to directly give them the data points that they use to form their own understanding of feelings and emotions. And so the first and most important thing that you can do, and I said it a million times in all these different videos that I make, is do your own self-work. To reparent yourself, to get up every morning and look in the mirror and say, there are no bad feelings. I don't care what mom and dad said. There are no bad feelings for me either. When I feel angry, it's okay to express that anger as long as it's in a healthy way. When I feel frustrated, I need to get that out. I need to name that and tame that. When I feel sadness, it is okay to allow myself to feel fully that sadness. And I want to say that even though this video is about parenting, I can't wait for you to start to see 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, how much more deeply you are able to feel the feelings of joy and encouragement, all of those things that you've classified historically as good feelings, how much more deeply you will allow those things to permeate every aspect and every corner of your life when you also allow in the feelings that you've traditionally classified as bad. Because here's the thing that nobody talks about, and I'd never heard anybody on any of these platforms say, but we know this to be true, is that if you suppress some feelings, you will always suppress a little bit all of your feelings. That your brain, the way that it works is that if it's not going to feel some things, it's going to intentionally suppress everything so that it can protect itself. And if you're, go from excitement to disappointment, your brain knows if I'm not allowed to feel a disappointment, I can't let myself fully feel excitement because excitement might lead to disappointment. So once you start fully feeling these things, I can't wait for you to see how much your life and your relationships improve beyond your kids. But it all starts, if we're only talking about your kids, it all starts with modeling those things for yourself. With, if you need therapy, going to therapy so that you can process these things, talking to trusted friends, being honest about your own feelings, not only with yourself, but with others. Being able to say, I am angry, being able to say, I am sad, just naming those things. I am hurt, I feel upset. All of these things are going to cause you to model to your kids that their feelings are mentionable and therefore manageable if they see you mentioning and managing your feelings that might be uncomfortable or problematic or, those bad feelings. The second thing that you need to do after you've begun the process of feeling your own feelings fully and modeling that to your kids, the second thing that you need to do is I want you to change and shift the way that you talk about feelings away from feelings make us do certain things to feelings are data. I know for some of you, you just turned off to me. You were just like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's gonna talk about data. Feelings are data. That's so silly. But I really do think this is a helpful paradigm, and it's helped so many parents that I've worked with. I want you to start thinking about feelings as data points, things that you can use to help you draw conclusions about the world. And so when you're feeling envious, I want you to think about as an outside observer, okay, I'm feeling envious. Why am I feeling that way? Become a researcher an investigator, a detective of your own feelings. Look at your feelings not as intrinsically good or bad. Look at your feelings as data points, and then and ask yourself what they are communicating to you, and use the same language with your kids. When your kid is frustrated, help them to draw their conscious attention to what is seemingly causing their frustration. And say, look, your body feels frustrated right now, and that's communicating something to you. It's communicating that there is this frustrating thing out in the world right now, that there's this frustrating thing in your life, and you should use that feeling to understand more about the world. You should use that feeling in the same way that a detective uses evidence to solve a case. You should use your feelings as data points to understand more about your world. This gives you tremendous power over your feelings. Remember, your child's brain is not going to be able to fully regulate their feelings and their emotions and their triggers ever in their life, really. None of us can fully regulate, but is not going to be at its peak development to be able to do those things until they're 25. And so giving them whatever power you can over those emotions and over those feelings, which by the way is the opposite of telling them not to feel those, then their feelings, their negative or bad or uncomfortable feelings have all the power over them if they refuse to feel them and refuse to acknowledge them. The opposite being, if you teach them that their feelings are communicating something to them, that they are data points that they can use to understand more about their life and their circumstances, then they actually gain power over those things. They can look at those things more as an outside observer and more objectively. And the more we can be objective with ourselves and non-judgmental of our own feelings, the more we're able to utilize those things to understand that our body is trying to communicate something to us when we feel something. When we have big feelings, good or, those that have been historically classified as bad or just uncomfortable feelings or just the tingling on the back of our neck, these things communicate something to us. And if we suppress those things and repress those things, we miss what that communication is trying to tell us. And so the second thing you got to do, you have to move to a model where feelings aren't just not good and bad. Feelings are objective. They're data points, they're metrics by which you can learn more about the world. So actually, in that way, not only are feelings not bad, they're all good, because all information is good information. All information, even information that doesn't validate our experience and causes us to question our worldview, is still good information. If it's true, and it's good for us. So not only are feelings not bad, all feelings are data, and data is good. It helps us make the most effective use of all of the resources available to us. Last but not least, the third thing that you can do that will help your child to know that no feelings are bad and to become more resilient and healthy children, but also adults later on in their life, is to effectively co-regulate with your kids. This is a really big concept that I can't fully get into in this video, but I just want to give you the kind of flyover 30,000 foot view of this, because I think that this is the next natural step that many of us, when we, think about feelings in these camps of good and bad, and which ones we should feel and which ones we shouldn't feel, or which ones we should avoid and which ones we should embrace. When we stop thinking about it in this way, we wind up with very few tools to help kids get through big, difficult, and uncomfortable feelings. And so co-regulation is this process by which you can actually help your kid get through any feeling. And it's really, really simple. I like to use the phrase connect and redirect. It comes from Tina Payne Bryson and Dan Siegel in their book, The Whole Brain Child, which is one of the best well-rounded parenting books out there, probably one of the most cited parenting books in other parenting books. But the concept of connect and redirect is that when your child is in these big meltdown moments, when they are feeling big feelings, now that you're not going to tell them to you're not going to deny their experience, you're not going to tell them to get out of those feelings, you're not going to tell them to stop feeling those things. Well, how do you actually effectively help them move through them? We can talk all we want about emotions being data points when our kids are calm, but when they're actually in that moment of meltdown, what do we do? And the answer is we have to connect with them at the feeling first. So we don't lead with logic, we lead with connection and feelings. And so when your kid is melting down over one of the things that we've kind of already mentioned in passing, or just, is melting down over maybe seemingly nothing, they're just having a really hard time, they're just really, frustrated or angry about something in their life, you meet them where you are and you lead with empathy and connection. You get down on their level, eye to eye, and you say, I understand that you are so upset right now. I understand that you're so frustrated. Use your own language to name the feeling that you're seeing in your child. It'll help them to name their feeling. So, hey, I understand that you're really disappointed right now, or you're really frustrated right now. I am frustrated with you. I am frustrated. I remember what it is to be frustrated, just like you're frustrated right now. And that frustration is okay, and it's good, and we're learning from it. And we will get through it together. I want you to hear that. That frustration is good, and we're going to learn from it, and we will get through it together. Your kid wants to know in those moments, am I going to be okay? And by connecting with the emotion that they're having at its baseline and validating their experience, yes, I understand that you're frustrated. It is okay to be frustrated. It is good to feel frustrated about frustrating things. Did you know that? Just parent on the other side of this, did you know that it's good to be frustrated about frustrating things? It's good to be angry when something should make you angry. It's good to feel anger. That's your body's natural good response to things that are unjust. That's our body's natural response to an injustice is anger. It's good to feel that. Go down to your kid. It's good that you're feeling these big feelings right now. I know that it's uncomfortable. We will get through it together. Connect with the feeling. Connect with the emotion empathetically, bring them into the world of feelings and welcome them as a person who has felt all of these things before. Your child likely will never feel anything until they're much later in development that you have not felt. And so understand that you can meet them where they are and you can say, I have been there, and they will believe you. They will trust you that you have also been there because you have, because they want to trust you. And all telling them don't feel these things is going to do is make them not trust you. But getting on their level and saying, I believe you, I validate what you're feeling, I am with you in this, is going to do the exact opposite. It's going to cause them to realize, okay, this feeling is not unmanageable. This feeling might feel overwhelming in the moment, but I'm going to get through it with this loving, caring presence, this person who understands me, this person who can hear me. Because all things that are mentionable are manageable. That's the truth. That's what Mr. Rogers teaches us. And there are no bad feelings. Feelings are all just data. And if we can connect with our kids on a deep level and help them move through those feelings and understand that those feelings are just resources that we can draw on, that those feelings should be felt, that those feelings should not be categorized into good and bad, we will realize, we will come to understand not only that we need to change and deconstruct this myth about bad feelings, but also that there's nothing in their life that they won't be able to get through. And I just want to kind of end on this note. This topic has always been important. It was important when Mr. Rogers said it in the 80s. It's important, or maybe a lot earlier than that. I think it was like the 60s or 70s when he was talking about this originally. It was important back then, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. It's important when we were kids in the 80s and 90s. It is even more important now because we are facing one of the greatest crises of mental health in teenagers and young people in the history of the world. We have never faced in the type of crisis that we are experiencing right now in Western culture as it relates to mental health and kids. And one of the primary reasons I am convinced that so many kids are struggling with mental health is because there are some feelings that they have been taught and conditioned and indoctrinated to suppress. And so if you wanted no other evidence, this is the best evidence for you. This is what we have to do. If we care about our kids, we have to deconstruct this harmful mindset. I welcome you into the no bad feelings club. I want you to take on this language and this mindset. I want you to change your parenting like so many of those in the membership have been able to do, like so many of those on my email list who follow me on other social channels are doing right now. They are taking this no bad feelings thing, they are running with it, and they are realizing that this is the challenge of our generation to deconstruct this myth. And if we are going to do better for our kids, we have to do it. We have to deconstruct this idea that there are bad feelings that shouldn't be felt. We have to move through into a better, more inclusive world where we can feel everything and therefore we can manage everything. Till next time, I'll see you then.